remember your first like experience maybe with the horror genre, or maybe the first scary movie you saw, or something like that?
Uh, I think the first horror movie I saw was Jason X, which wasn't a great intro, but I was a little kid and I was like scared of everything, but I was always interested in all this stuff, in the spooky stuff. But for some reason, I guess the Sci-Fi Channel was on at my grandparents' house, and all I saw was Uber Jason, and I freaked out, and I had to watch the TV show That's So Raven to go to bed. I was that frightened as a kid, but later on, I ended up liking more horror movies. Always liked Nightmare on Elm Street and stuff like that. I think Freddy Krueger was my like first character that I really got into.
Um, and for you then, as you move through your teens and whatever, when was being involved in the industry something that you were like maybe getting a little bit more serious about? I feel like maybe at some stage, like all, especially boys, are like, oh yeah, I want to like work in the movies or special effects or something like that. But when for you did the point switch where you were like, this sort of stuff is something I want to do as a profession?
Well, at the time, I still live in Wisconsin to this day, but there's not really opportunities for film or anything like that in the area. So what I really got big into was haunted attractions. I started volunteering at haunted houses, and then eventually getting into making my own. I believe the first haunted house I started was, I think I was, shoot, maybe 15, maybe 16. It was at a horse stable riding club, and they had a horse trail. And I convinced the people putting that horse trail together that if I could do a little haunted trail for, I think it was like 2 weekends, and then from there. I used to, when I was younger, I would make a certain amount of stuff, but then I would buy a certain amount of stuff. And then now, as I've gotten older, I've been more into, I want to make everything as much as possible, and not use too many store bought things. Because when I was a kid, I think I had that life size Jason figure that Jemmy sold, and I thought that was the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
that like in the haunted house somewhere, and later on, something like that, I would never put in a haunted house. I would try to build something from scratch, but I got smarter about how to build things from scratch because of budget reasons and stuff like that. And building a bigger show costs more than what I used to do. Was a trail with tents, and you went through the tents, and it really didn't work that well because one night I don't, I'm not a big football fan or anything like that, but we had the Green Bay Packers come through,
Oh wow.
and I didn't know who, but all my actors knew who they were. But they're such tall men, they kept ducking in all the tents, and I was like, okay, I can't do tents no more. So had to upgrade and stuff, but yeah, pretty much haunted house stuff came first, and then eventually I just got lucky where the right people saw the work I was doing and wanted to hire me to make things.
And I'm fascinated by that because I'm a huge uh, haunted attraction guy. So much so actually that every September I fly to Orlando to do Halloween Horror Nights, Hello Scream, whatever attractions I can do, because we haven't really had a. We have probably less than five in Ireland. Um,
Yeah,
and like they're on a way lesser scale than you guys. I think even probably your guys' is like mid-range haunted attractions would be like a top tier attraction in Ireland.
yeah. Mine, I would say, is still pretty low budget. Like I have less than 100 grand invested into my haunt. Where haunt, there's like what we call a mega haunt. There's one in about half hour from me, and they probably have like $3 million into it. And I, at this point, I can't touch that. I wish, but a lot of it actually is, I think, marketing too. So that gets really expensive. But building all the sets are expensive. But yeah, I was at this trade show, and I noticed I've been going to this trade show for the last 10 years. It's a haunted house trade show, and I don't see too many people from other countries. So I don't know if it's mainly a United States thing. um, Halloween Horror Nights I haven't even been to yet. I've provided things for them to use, like the good guy pictures and all that stuff. But other than that, never been there. One day I will.
And it's funny because that's probably originally maybe what got me into haunts, and then from there I've actually found that I'm enjoying some of the lesser, like those are cool. You can go and walk through maybe an exact replica of a scene from a movie you love or something. But I've realized
Yeah.
over the last maybe 6 or 8 years, I actually really enjoy exploring other haunts. Like I've had this bucket list thing in the back of my head where I want to go to the States for like the entire month of October and like drive around the States and do all these different haunts.
Well, during COVID, I had never in, I don't know, 10 plus years had a break from October. And at the time, the place I was renting was owned by this university, and they weren't letting any of their facilities open for during COVID. So I was in October. I went to other haunts that were still opening because a lot of them are outdoors anyway, and they had a way of putting everyone separate and stuff. But it was really fun to travel around Wisconsin and see these haunts that I never got to really enjoy. So, but now doing what I do, I barely get a chance to get out in October. I'm pretty
Yeah.
busy.
Um, how difficult is it to put something like that together? I know you were being like quite humble there and saying like we only have X amount of money invested and whatever, but like I don't think people realize how. I think if you're not interested or actively like professionally working in the haunt community, you'll never really understand maybe the logistics of putting something like that together.
Yeah, I think I started so this last haunt. I used to do other haunts and we'd have partnerships and stuff like that, but I wanted to get away from doing a partnership. And the last haunt, the Haunted Voyage that I run now, um, that one I started I think with $20,000, and at the time I had a big collection of movie prop memorabilia, and I sold a good chunk of it to get that started because I didn't want to take out a loan. I think it's really hard in general to take out a loan when you're talking to a loan officer and you want money for a haunted house. They're like,
Yeah.
they don't believe in all that. So it was gonna have to come out of my own pocket. But then over the years, I would just put the money right back into the haunt, and still kept it under 100K, which is pretty good for how good of a quality haunt it is. What I try to do is, I'm not sure if this is on Facebook. They have Facebook Marketplace. I'm not sure if you guys have that.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, but I would just type in the word free, and I would look for anything that was free. Free wood, every once in a while, a guy from a construction site that I know of would hit me up and say, "Hey, we got all this leftover wood. Do you want it?" And I would get that, and then a lot of it we would buy. But I got a lot of good friends that come out and help me, and they work for pizza and stuff like that. And and that's how you do it. It's really hard to, because every once in a while I'll talk to someone in the haunt that's getting into the haunt business that here's how it can be pretty profitable, and they just want to buy everything. They want to buy the
Yeah.
people. Everything has to be bought, and that those types of haunts tend to just lose money, and not work out, and you really have to love doing it, not just hear about how it makes money. Because I think my haunt took several years before it was profitable. Um, but eventually, this past year, it did really well. So I don't know if it was people getting off of COVID and they really wanted to get back out again, or I changed and marketed the haunt as well. I got a little smarter with that, and we did huge numbers. I At one point we didn't even know what to do with the customers we had because there was just so many customers. So I'm planning that this year so that we'll get more, but it seems to be doing much better than it used to be. Um, yeah, it's tricky, but if you have the passion for it, it's not hard work in my mind. I get stressed out every once in a while about it, but when the haunt's running and the customers are going through it, it's really rewarding.
Um, and you know, aside from I guess the logistics of putting the thing together, what would you say is the key to making it successful? Because I think, especially something like that, is a lot of people see it as like an overnight success, kind of like what you said about people hear about how profitable it can be, and don't realize obviously that the years of work that have to go into it. But for you, what would you say in the current state of like the haunt industry? Is it marketing or how you like promote?
I would say marketing, and the only reason you could sell what we refer to shit on the shingle. If you could do a haunt for 1 year and make a lot of money and produce a really bad haunt, but people are never going to come back again. But marketing is very key to get people there, especially our locations out in the middle of nowhere. It's actually on campground where they actually have summer camps, and it's out in the middle of nowhere. So you have to have decent signage just so people know where to go out in the boonies, as we call it. But it takes a lot of marketing. So I do a lot of Facebook marketing. I last 2 years ago I hired a marketing agency, and it did not work out very well. I thought that they kind of just took my money and didn't do enough. And so I did a little bit of research and asked. I mean, one of the big things for anything is just reaching out to other people that own haunts and ask questions. And I ended up doing it all the marketing myself, and it worked really well. This year, our marketing's even crazier. I don't know how, and I wouldn't say money wise. It's just we've really themed out the haunt to be this very specific thing, almost kind of like one thing I like about when I've seen this just in videos with Halloween Horror Nights is when they have a horror property character, they make it all about that character and then they play different scenes from the movie in the show, and then they have different voices going on from the movie.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I always thought it was cool. And so this year we're kind of making we have our main themed character, which is Rabby the raccoon. It's Killer Raccoon, and we've really themed that out even more this year so that it's almost telling a story like a movie. So it's like a movie you never watched before,
Mm-hmm.
but you're in it, and it's gonna. I want the show to have that feel of this is your favorite movie you're going through, but you've never heard of it. So it theming it up with the marketing where it shows the raccoon, and we don't show it's like Jaws, like we don't show the puppet until like the goal at the end is to have the big mama puppet, and it's a 6 foot tall
Wow.
animatronic raccoon, and that's what I have to build literally after this month. That's when I start working on it. But it's got to look legit, but at the same time, very 80s animatronic look. So that's what we're trying to build up. Is this thing that behind the curtain is this thing, and that's our advertising plan this year is to kind of bring it off like that. Because I got kind of sick of doing the haunted house tropes where it's like this is the clown room and this is
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the butcher's room, and I wanted to really theme it out as much as I could to what the summer camp is, and that this summer camp has killer raccoons. So that's what we have more in store this year. We're just going really ham on the theme. We're having about a little over 50 regular sized raccoons built, and then the mama. So that's
I love that, and like the artwork for that looks badass as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. A friend of mine, a black cough. I'm probably pronouncing it. I think it's Black Coffin or Coffin. He has Instagram, and I really like the work he was doing. He gave me which is a great thing that where he had a Child's Play T-shirt that he made, and he just sent me one as a gift,
Hmm.
and I really appreciated that. And so I knew when I was gonna start, looking to get artwork done for the haunt, I was gonna hire him if he was within reason, which he was. He was very affordable. We ended up doing some sort of doll trade for the artwork, so he got a good guy doll out of it.
That's a good trade. Is
Yeah,
that
I like.
something as well that you find is important? Like I feel like sometimes, because I've got so big into haunts in the last say 10 years, it reminds me of when like years ago at like Blockbuster or a video store, and you would get drawn into something by the cool artwork or the VHS cover, and like when I look at something like that straight away, it piques my interest. And I'm like, I want to know what that story is about. I want to know what that is.
Well, it's like probably owned every Goosebumps book, but I've probably only read four of the books. I just loved the cover art. It was so cool and interesting. And I'm just not much for reading, but I at least read four of the books, maybe five. But that was cool, and that drew you in, and you just had to have it, like almost like a Pokemon card or something like that. But yeah, like the VHS covers. There was a guy in Mishicot where that's where my haunt's located, and he had a place called the Pictorium, and it was a video rental store. And the guy was a huge horror fan, so he had everything. He was just, it was just really cool. He had everything, Texas Chainsaw Part 2, all these just random movies that, family video would just phase out over the while. He had them. And it was just, that's what got me really into, I think, horror, was seeing those in the stores. I always liked Halloween in general. But, once I started seeing all the stuff at the video stores, I really wanted to rent out. And I would prefer to buy. I would usually rent out the trashy movies, but I
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, and I know it's probably like super difficult. Maybe not so after hearing what you said over the last few minutes. But um, would it ever be something that's crossed your mind? The idea of now I can imagine the logistics and licensing behind that would be like next to impossible. But I know you're a fan of Leprechaun, right?
yes, that's my
The
favorite
idea
movie.
of maybe being able to like do, I don't know, a haunted attraction on that. I actually have a full size, I don't know if you could see it there, a full size bust
Oh,
of
very cool.
the leprechaun right there.
Okay, I think who makes that? I can't remember. There's like three guys that make different leprechauns, but I think that guy makes Chucky's too, doesn't he? Or am I
Potentially,
thinking?
I can't remember. Let me see if I can find it
It's hard to see it in the picture there, but
in the background. Yeah, I know it's hard to.
yeah, I tried to recreate a costume for myself, which I'm 6'2", so I don't make a very good leprechaun. But uh, I was all out. It had to have I wanted it from the first film, so I had the little red knickers, what those called, or
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah.
and I, and the coat, but then it had to have the blue ripple material. I was just really anal about it. And I have a friend of mine from Closed Casket. He does, Mark Anthony. He does really good. He makes different figures. Mainly, he's known for the Annabelle. But he made a leprechaun, and I was like bugging him. Like, I wish I had time to help you because I want to make. I'm really anal about the costumes. I want costumes to look really cool, and I was just nerding out about that because that would be cool to do a themed haunt with, if I had the license, like Chucky. I got all the molds for that, so I could do that. Where I probably for the haunt I just make blank castings of the good guy heads, and I'll hang them. They're not painted or finished or nothing. They're just flesh tone,
Mhm.
so they're not. Chucky yet, but that's the only thing I do that is sort of passable, but you don't need a license for it. Like if you were going to do a whole Chucky room, you might have to look into getting the rights for it. But in the queue line of the haunt, we have an indoor queue line. I have displays of original movie
Oh,
memorabilia from,
nice.
so that when people are waiting in line, they can. It's a little museum, and it's kind of cool for people to read stuff, and it kind of takes their mind off the wait. So.
How much of like when the haunt is open and operational, are you like on site all the time?
I have to be there. I had to. So I the first year or two we were so low staffed. I was acting in it, but I would wear something very like something that could come off very easily to be the owner. Something happened, which happened. Every once in a while you have a situation with a customer and you got to go take care of it, make sure they're okay. Someone trips. Um, you got to go take care of them and whatever and make sure they're fine. But yeah, the last couple of years I've been like very strict with I need to be at the front door or checking. Like I'm technically part security and part owner. I'm actually even looking at getting a golf cart this year. I'm getting too old. It's like a
Running
my
everywhere.
main show, so I just I'm getting old and I'm sick of running. So as an owner, I've gotten, I would say I'm more professional than I used to be when I first started running it. I was kind of, very amateur, where now I, I'm very, I've been more concerned about the liability of running a haunt than other things lately because I just want to make sure I'm doing everything correctly.
Um, and as regards the haunt, like, do you have an ultimate goal that you would like to achieve with it? Would it be like I guess I don't know, like because I feel like a lot of these places now, and even from looking at like I said, even just that artwork alone, it looks and
Yeah.
feels already from the outside like an already established like IP, if that makes sense, within like the confines of the story that you've obviously made up. Is that like the ultimate goal to have like a
Well, I want to go ham on, like this year we're making mascot suits and having it seem very, I mean, it is legit, but to make it more uh, like a lice or whatever you call it, it's a real thing instead of just a pop-up haunt. It's a little more um, legit. But to me, the goal, it's hard to say what the goal is in the future with it because currently I've gotten it as big as I want it to. If it gets any bigger, it gets really hard to manage. Especially the camp runs as a summer camp, so we only have a certain amount of months to actually have certain things set up, and then we have to take it down. So I had to put up these little show buildings that are permanent, but then everything kind of folds in like an accordion at the end of the year. And so building more stuff always concerns me. Like this year, we expanded one of our show buildings to double the size, and build, and I'm very happy where it's at now. And I don't know if I want to make it any bigger, and because it's hard to get the help. Getting actors is really difficult.
yeah.
I always the first weekend you get 30 or 40 actors, and you're like, wow, this is amazing. And then by the last weekend, you might just have 12 people. So
Yeah.
you got to make up with scenic design and animatronics, different things that kind of you can space actors out to make it work.
What is obviously without going into specifics for your haunt in general, but like what's a standard or an average attendance for a haunt? Like what's good for a haunt? I always wonder that. Like sometimes I've been to attractions where I feel like they've probably spent a lot of money and time, and there seems to
Yeah.
be nobody there. And then there's other times I've gone to haunts that seem to have a budget like a shoestring budget, and it's like crazy how many people seem to show up.
It all depends on the time because I know the second last weekend of October, we call it the Super Bowl weekend of haunts because that's probably the most busiest time to go to a haunted house. So whenever I talk to any of my friends that want to come, I'm like, don't come the second last weekend because it's going to be ridiculous. I mean, we had crowds to the parking lot. Um, the haunt roughly sometimes on weekends you do 1,000 people or more. It used to be when I first started it, you only get a couple hundred people in the weekend, and now it's gotten to be a little bit more. And I don't know if that. I'm still worried that is that a fluke? Was that just people? We had really good weather. There was a year back in 2017 where it poured almost every day, and we just did horrible. And any place does horrible. It's like when it's raining, people just don't want to go out. They want to
Yeah.
stay in. So even for indoor haunts, it sucked for them. But it all depends. So if we have good weather this year, I think the biggest challenge this year is last year we had 5 weekends that just the 5 weekends fit in that month of October. This year, only 4 weekends fit in October. So we're only going to do 4 weekends. So we're going to kind of curious how that goes. My goal is we're just going to have more volume per night um, to make it. But our haunts, like I said, like our haunt isn't a mega haunt. It's I would still say not mom and pop haunt. It's a little more pro than that, but it's somewhere in the middle. But we now where it's at, it does really well. It's definitely a success compared to what it was a couple years ago.
Is it something that you can see yourself doing for a long time?
Um, I kind of hope so, because with the Chucky work I do, Chucky pays the bills basically. He makes everything happen. If it wasn't for the doll, I wouldn't be here. I'd probably be in an apartment somewhere, still trying to run the haunted house, but be in an apartment. But I would like to get away from doing the doll stuff and get the haunt to be to that point where it's gonna financially support me the whole year. Last year, I would say technically it financially supported me through the whole year. It did very well, but that was a lucky year. I don't know if that was a lucky year or not, but my goal eventually, and this is years down the line, is just some land and start a storage rental business on the side that's just there on the property, and then we have the haunt there. But that's I don't know how far away that is, but I would love to do that. That to me would be more successful financially when you own the land
Yeah,
compared to
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I could see that.
yeah, so that's definitely in the back of my mind in the future. Just don't know when I'll pull the trigger on that one because land's all over the place. Like right now, everything's really expensive, and so hopefully the market will come down and I can do something like that. But that to me is the goal. Um, but right now, as it sits, I'm pretty happy with where I'm at. But in order to make it full time successful, the land has to be purchased. I think.
Yeah, yeah. Obviously you mentioned your work with Chucky and Child's Play. For people, maybe people listening that don't know, how exactly did you come to be involved with that whole thing?
Um, it was just I was posting stuff online. I think it was either Facebook or Instagram, and Tony Gardner reached out to me and asked, if they needed help with stuff, and I ended up making them some doll parts and providing like shoelaces and different castings of the doll, and then fabric samples, different stuff like that to kind of help them. And that was for Cult of Chucky. And then that ended up snowballing into when they got the TV show, and then they had me make some more stuff, and it providing some of the head pieces for the show to make Chucky look a little better. I think there was a moment where he looked okay, and I don't want to insult anyone's work, but he in the TV show he does look a lot better than he did in the last couple of films, in my opinion.
What is that like to get a call like that and be like, "Hey, want to like basically make Chucky?"
Yeah, it was. I can't remember which came first. If it was Cult of Chucky or Trick or Treat Studios wanting to do the dolls. Um, but Tony called me, and I had watched a couple different interviews of Tony Gardner, and he has this. Everyone kind of has their own distinct voice, and it was like it was really him. Like I wasn't, some random account messaging you online. You want to make sure it's real. So it was really cool to talk with him, and then that ended up leading to getting in contact with Don Mancini, and they were more really they were more interested in getting the look of the doll to look like Child's Play 2. They loved Child's Play 2. I mean, who doesn't? It's probably, in my opinion, the best Chucky film out there.
Yeah.
But they wanted colors and different things, and they've gotten pretty close. I'm just a nitpick, but they got it pretty close where it looks good. Sometimes it's really hard to get all original materials, like dyeing the exact corduroy colors or getting the exact thread of color for the sweater and stuff like that. But they've gotten pretty good. We provided the wigs for the TV show, and it's the exact color of Chucky's hair from Child's Play 2. I had a wig from the movie, and I sent a swatch to the actual company that made the wigs back then, and they sent us all the hair, and then we made all the wigs and stuff. My seamstress put the wigs together, and so we got there's some good stuff in that show, some more accurate stuff.
And as it stands now, obviously, season three, and I'm assuming I would like to hope that that's going to continue on and on. It seems to be quite well received. But for you personally, like obviously I mentioned Leprechaun a while ago. Is that something you'd like to work on? Is there things out there that are on like maybe your bucket list to be like, I want to like to be involved in that or this?
I'd just like to work on a set because like how it is, like the TV show is filmed in Canada, so mainly the limitation there is they have to hire mainly Canadian crew. They can't have they can have Americans on there, but there's limitations to it. And I was in California last year. I'm not going to say what the project is yet, but working on the set was really it. It was just so cool, and then having sound people and lighting people, and it was like this is what I want to do, but I so does many other people, so it's kind of hard to stand out. So lately, it's just been Chucky, and that's been kind of it. The haunted house and Chucky keep me very busy. It's hard for me to like when we scheduled this together. I think I scheduled you for the following week, and it's like I just can't. I have to,
Yeah,
plan
yeah.
this all. I'm constantly working on the haunt or building dolls and different stuff like that. Because I do build some dolls for what I call private clients that just want something a little more handmade rather than a factory piece. Even the are fine, but that's what some people want that, so that keeps me pretty busy making those.
Yeah, I can imagine. Is it a? I know you can't say too much about it, but said project that you were on, is it a horror
Uh
project?
sure, I can say that. But yeah, it was just really cool. It was the first time I ever been on a setup where there was cameras and lights, and I I went out to some clubs down in California, and I thought the people were really mean down there, so
Really?
I kind of butthurt about that because I'm a Midwestern guy, and I'm just a very please and thank you, and kind of person, and it's a little bit different down in California how people act. Not everyone's like that, but it was different. But it was like, in my head, it's like, do I move to California? Is that where I should go, or do I stick with haunted houses? Because film is very unpredictable. I mean, right now there's a strike going on and no one's working, so it's. I have effects artist friends that can't. They're just sitting at home, and some of them can't even can't do unemployment for whatever reason they're set up. They can't claim unemployment either. So I feel really bad for those people, and it's like, I don't know. I kind of like doing what I'm doing. It still works. The haunt works. Making projects, artwork on the side works. Um, but it's really expensive to live in California. Where like here, I bought a house for really cheap in where I live in Wisconsin, and I'm a fixer kind of dude, and I got it all fixed up and pretty, and even that wasn't. It was labor intensive, but it wasn't expensive, and I live pretty on the cheap, and that's the way I kind of like to keep it.
I guess like that probably helps with a lot of that stuff, like even the haunt, trying to like not like you mentioned before. And I think I've actually had conversations, or I've talked to people who were toying with the idea of maybe opening a haunt, and it was like, oh yeah, I gotta go to like X trade show and I gotta spend like 200,000 on like props and boo doors and all this stuff. And I'm like, could you not like even? I see dudes, like I see YouTube channels where guys even show you how to like get pieces of wood and try and work from scratch.
Yeah, it kind of comes down to, when you do a haunt, you got to have the passion for it, because it takes a long time to make it profitable, if it ever even becomes profitable. A lot of times I would just break even, if I was lucky. You know, I I mean, the last couple of years, what I've been doing is just putting stuff in there that I like, what I think is cool, and sometimes it's beyond the budget of what should be done, but I just want to do it. I think that looks cool. The other day, or a couple days ago, I bought the back end of a school bus because
Oh
I
wow.
thought it'd be. Yeah, it wasn't expensive, but it was just a pain. I didn't need it, but it was like, this would be so cool. Like, imagine, you're walking through a scene, and all of a sudden you see this school bus, which would have been used for summer camp to go on trips, and it's all rusty looking, and you got to enter the back of the bus, and the tires are flat, so the sort of the axles, like, everything's on the ground, and to me that's cool, but it's like, I don't think I'm gonna have time for that, but I'm gonna try to finish it and make it look cool. But it's stuff like that. Sometimes you buy it because it's cool, but a lot of times, I started my hunt out with buying like pallets and screwing pallets together, and that works. This year I'm phasing out most of the pallet walls I made, because unfortunately, nests, they love living in them pallets. So
Oh wow. Yeah.
in
That.
October they all die. Deal with it. But during build season, it sucks. So I phased out most of the pallet walls, and actually built nice walls with treated lumber and stuff like that, which costs more. So I don't know. I kind of put a lot into it this year because I had a little more time. So we'll see if it becomes profitable or not. I just don't. I'm just throwing money and seeing what looks cool and going from there. Um, but it's been nice because of Chucky. I've been able to afford to take those risks, and it's paid off. I would say the risks I've taken on that. But I wouldn't be able to afford that probably if I worked at a fitness center before I started making dolls for people. So I was making, back then it was like $10 an hour or something. So it wasn't a lot
Mm-hmm.
of money. But now, in the state I'm doing now, it's easier to do, to make things look cooler. Um, like I was even saying with the golf cart, I got to pick up a golf cart, even though I don't need it. It's just gonna make my life easier in the future when I get older. I'm only 29, but I can't do things like I could do when I was like 18 or 20. That's for sure.
especially on a consistent basis like that. What are your thoughts on maybe some of the more less traditional haunts? Like, for example, something like, have you heard of McCamey Manor?
Yeah, I think I'm actually friends with that guy on Facebook. And then I seen him at this trade show I was at last. I didn't say hi or anything, but because I didn't know him or anything like that. But um, it's hard to say because there's different types of entertainment out there that people want, like people jumping off a cliff or out of a plane, or you know, and he's providing a show that apparently some people want to go to. Personally, I mean, I there's some haunted attractions that they're called touch haunts. So it's a haunt that the actors or different props are touching the customer, and I avoid that completely. I never would do a touch haunt because of the liability of it, especially nowadays how things are. Putting good faith in your actors and saying, okay, you can touch these people, but make sure all of a sudden a customer could move and they swipe a boob or something like that,
Yeah, and that's it
and
then.
sexual assault. So you're like, so I try to avoid it completely. I tell my actors you can't touch anybody, and the customers know that's a non-touch haunt. So it just puts that liability out. So I know there's like waivers. I think McKinley Manor will have you sign, but people can sign through sue through waivers very easily. At least in America, they can,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah. I've heard that.
they'll sue you if they break a toenail. So it's definitely scary. So I always have really good insurance, and don't do touch. So yeah, like his haunt is fine. I've never been to it. Like I said, there's always some sort of. I can't knock the guy because he's created some sort of entertainment that people want to see. But personally, I would not go that route.
Yeah, I'm more fascinated by. I can't tell if he's just extremely clever at like his marketing ploy in the sense of I know he gets an awful lot of bad press and whatever, but like no matter what's happened to his haunt, like he's moved across the country several times to different locations, it always seems to
Yeah,
have this weird like mystique behind it, and I'm like, if half of it, like if some of this stuff isn't even true and it's just like been put out there and he let people run wild, he is like extremely clever in what he's doing. But like even I had talked about him before on I can't remember the dude's name right now. He made a documentary about haunts. I think it was called
yeah,
Haunters. And
right. Is it?
yeah, yeah,
Um, I remember watching that documentary and being like extremely disappointed.
yeah, I know.
The only thing because I think it went and talked about. I think there was two home haunters,
Yep,
and maybe there was one haunt, but then it went to McKinley, and I think they made
just
the rest of the
just off
documentary
on
about,
that. Yeah, yeah,
and I think it's called The Art of the Scare. Am
yeah.
I right?
That's it.
And I was like, man, I wish they would have got one legit haunt in there, um, to talk about how like a real haunted attraction is operated.
Yeah, I feel like it didn't really like. I got no in. Like I'm so interested in the industry and just finding out like all the little behind the scenes and all the preparation and the ideas and how people just kind of make something sometimes out of, like you said, like go on Facebook Marketplace and just find free stuff and make it cool and make it work, and it didn't
Check this.
really do that.
This is there's something I got on Marketplace that is pretty cool. So actually, I'll take that back. I didn't get this on Marketplace. It was a friend of a friend. I got
Oh
this for
wow.
free. It's an original. This is how they used to taxidermy deer. They would actually
Wow.
put the real, and then this is just wood pieces. But I cleaned it up, and I'm gonna let it dry now, and then I'm gonna coat it. I'm gonna my house. It's to me it's too cool to put in a haunt.
I
But
know,
stuff
yeah.
like once in a while you get lucky with like a weird oddity, um, and you know, you that's cooler than anything you could buy at Halloween Express, you know, or
Yeah,
so.
it's true. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Um, and like I remember, I think I said something on a podcast, and then like because obviously with the time difference, it was like I don't know, like 4 or 5 a.m. a couple of nights later, I get an email, and um, it's from Russ McCamey, and it just says, "I hear you were looking for me. Call me." Because I had said
Oh,
something about McCamey Manor, and I was like, "Wait a second." I was like, "Is this dude just
he wants a
psy-
date.
like psychotically good at trying to like drum up constant conversation, even if it is negative?"
Well, at this trade, I should say convention, it's a trade show. I saw him there, and he was walking around with his iPhone on, I think it was a tripod, or maybe he was holding it. I can't remember, but it was just kind of bizarre. Like, and there's a page. It's called Haunt Hub on Facebook, and they were kind of like they were making fun of him on there because he was just this oddball guy walking around videotaping like everything. There was a party where everyone was, having fun, and here he is recording everyone at this party, and you're just like, like
Yeah, he's a
he,
strange, strange dude.
he didn't talk to anybody. He was just walking around with this camera, and I don't know.
Yeah, he's a
He's I didn't
strange guy.
like knock his hot, but he's different, dude. You don't know if it's an act or not.
And I think that's the only reason most people are intrigued. Do you have? Do you watch a lot of horror or consume a lot of horror? I know, like you're so busy now, but is it still something that you like make time for?
Well, a lot of times I'm not necessarily watching movies. I'll buy like Blu-rays or DVDs, and I'll play a movie while I'm working, but I'll have the commentary on. If there's a commentary
Oh
on there,
yeah, 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 yeah.
I
I love that.
love commentary. So like it's like free education, or like whatever you end up paying for the DVD. But it's an education that's there. And I remember as a kid seeing the word commentary on a DVD, and I was like, what is this shit? I didn't know. Why would anyone want to hear about, why would anyone would want to hear about the director who made the movie? But nowadays, as I'm older, I'm like, oh, this is great education. Like, special effects artist is talking about how they made something. And then I like to hear the struggle. So they talk about the limitations. A lot of times, these films in the 80s and early 90s were done so budgeted, and they were, doing things, some people were doing things for nothing. And then they're kind of explaining these commentaries, how they made this shot work for nothing. And it's very interesting. So that's what I'll do. That's my kind of. I'm watching horror movies, but it could be anything. Like the other night, I was watching the movie. I've already seen the movie Happy Gilmore, but there was the commentary, and it was not Happy Gilmore, Billy Madison,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
there's a comment of this woman that directed Billy Madison, and she's talking about how she made the movie, and I thought that was just the coolest thing, just to hear her talk about getting involved in it, and stuff like that. And then the big thing for me was, and I didn't know they were going to say anything, but in the DVD of Cult of Chucky, in the commentary, they actually mentioned my name. Really cool. I was really happy about that, because I was like, wow, like it's kind of like being your legacy is secure, even though it's very
Yeah,
minute, all, but someone said your name, and then in the credits, my name's in the credits, and it's like forever. It'll be there. I'll die in, so many years, and there'll always be that Blu-ray or whatever format they're selling at Walmart, the pack of all the movies, and it'll always be there every October, and I think that's pretty cool.
yeah. That's what I and I've said that multiple times to people. Actually, it's that thing that's like long after we're all gone and all that stuff is gone. Like that can never be erased, and I think that's cool.
Yeah.
And what I love then is I see things like after however many years, I feel like physical media, especially in like a special edition format, has really like had a resurgence. So it's cool. Like, who knows that if in maybe 10, 15 years that you don't get asked to do maybe your version of a commentary over that for a box set. Like, I've seen that stuff happen now where they bring people completely, because I feel like a lot of
Yeah.
times when I listen to a lot of commentaries now, I've even like I've hunted YouTube for ones that I can't find the Blu-ray for, and like there'll
Yeah.
be a channel that will randomly have it uploaded. Um, and like I think that's really cool. Sometimes like I like hearing what the assistant director or the writer or the special effects guy give his commentary instead of just hearing another version of the director's.
Right. Yeah, I think it was like in Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. It's his daughter in the
Yeah,
talking, because obviously Stanley's gone, and it's still very interesting because, well, she was there anyway, but it's just cool to hear, even anything about it. And it's like they'll come out with a new Blu-ray set for, Child's Play, and they'll have some extra commentary or some interview or some found footage, and people will just buy it, especially with Chucky. The fans will just buy it because they want that updated. I had to buy the updated Child's Play 2 Blu-ray because I just wanted to hear the commentary with John LaFia
yeah,
talking about how, and it was actually really sad. So if you don't know, John LaFia committed suicide about a year or two ago, and he directed Child's Play 2, and he also was part of the writing in the original Child's Play. But there was one point in the commentary where he got very emotional about something, and he was almost like, it sounded like he was crying, and it was really sad, and then I think not too long after, he committed suicide. So it's really interesting, like, when you're hearing these commentaries and stuff, just, even seeing the emotional side of things and how people felt during the film and all that. And so I don't know, I've gone.
no, but do you feel like actually, because it's funny, because I feel like you're one of the first people, when I say that to a lot of people now, that I spend more time listening to those commentaries or whatever it might be than I do an actual movie, especially when I've seen, like, for example, I love House of a Thousand Corpses,
Mm.
and I have like so many different versions of that movie, and I just want I want more commentaries from people who were involved. I want to find out more, just because it seemed like such a wild production. It's so like it's just a collection of random scenes and characters and props and
Yeah, and every once in a while, like, I think, like, Rob Zombie, I'm not a huge fan of after the Halloween stuff, but the House of a Thousand Corpses, I always like that movie. And so every once in a while, I'll see an interview with him, and he'll talk about it and how crazy the production was. And I think it changed over 3 different studios. And it's always interesting to hear stuff like that. A couple nights ago, I bought in this. It was a 3 or 4 set movie of It's Alive. Didn't watch the movie at all. Just listen to commentary to talk. That's a super budgeted movie, and you're just hearing. I just wanted to hear the director talk about how he made it. I didn't care to watch the movie at all. I just wanted to listen. I still haven't watched any of the It's Alive movies. I've just listened to the commentaries of
do,
them.
do you find that helps with like your, I don't know, your creative juices, like to have stuff that on either in the background, or if you're taking maybe a little break or relaxing, to be still consuming some of that stuff?
Um, at this point, like, I don't know, if I ever get into film where I'm working on sets heavily, I feel like by listening to those commentaries, you have a little bit of insight. Obviously, you got to be there on set and learn things, and it's not as easy as just listening to some commentaries. But where was I going with that? Shoot. What was the question again? I'm sorry.
I was just asking about like, is it something that you find like gets your, uh, I I don't even know if I want to say like creative juices flowing, but like I feel like I've become so interested in that now, and like I like to consume that stuff, and I feel like sometimes it kicks off maybe an idea, or it might, for example, we were going to talk today, and I might hear something in maybe a different Chucky movie commentary or something, and I might go, oh, I'd like to ask Garrett that question and see what his take on that is, or see, try that.
Yeah, I think the main thing that's inspired me with those types of like listening to commentaries and stuff is probably Texas Chainsaw Part Two because I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but he was the set designer for Part Two, and they were talking to him about he had never done a movie before, and this was his he was known in the community as he's made all these sets and for like stage production maybe or something like that, and they hired him to do the set decorating for the layer in Texas too, and it's so cool. And he talks about how they just got stuff, and I'm like, man, this is all about what haunted house building is all about. It's just getting stuff, and every time I'm lugging something new to the haunt, the people that own the property are like, "What the heck?" I'm just bringing more and more junk. It kind of looks like a junkyard in a sense. I mean, it's cleaned up, and it's not completely a junkyard, but um, you know, watch watching documentaries and listening to commentaries, especially from set design people, are really cool. I wish they would do that more in commentaries instead of doing like I think the only thing that disappointed me about the Child's Play Blu-rays that came out recently is they didn't go to the effects artists and try to get a new commentary made
Yeah,
with
yeah.
Kevin. They should have got him to at least talk about Child's Play 2 and 3 because it's just actors of the film. Um, but I was really hoping for a little bit more, especially when you're buying a whole new Blu-ray. But I'm sure in the next Blu-ray they'll get them in 4 or 5 years. We'll have a new Blu-ray. So
Probably, to be honest. Still kind of keeping on the topic that I have a handful of questions before I let you go. Um, is there any? Do you have any comfort movies that you find yourself watching where you'll actually like actively watch the movie itself?
good question. I maybe I would say Leprechaun, and only because it's one of those movies that just charms you. Or I should not. Pee Wee's Big Adventure is probably
Yeah,
the most
yeah, yeah, yeah.
movie. It is so. My father showed me that movie, and he must have recorded it off of the TV with his cassette tape, and so you got to watch all the commercials from back then when he recorded it. On top of that, but um, that movie is just so good. I don't know how to explain it, but it's just a good movie. And I haven't liked the other films. I just like Big Adventure, and that's my favorite Pee Wee movie. But that's the movie I could sit and just watch whenever and chuckle. And
Yeah, yeah. You know what? I feel like I have that. Maybe not so much in the last couple of years. I find myself doing what you were talking about listening to commentaries and stuff more than actual movies. But I used to find like I have a severe nostalgia for some of those 90s movies, like the Dennis the Menace movie, the Adams Family and Adams Family Values, that kind of stuff. I used to find myself constantly revisiting.
well, like there was a movie I watched that I think came out probably when I was a kid that I had never watched, but it's called Little Nicky. And I watched it for the first time like maybe like a year ago, and it was the biggest grin on my face through the whole movie. I'm like, why have I never watched this movie? It's stupid. I love stupid movies, so it's kind of like funny, stupid, and that's what my haunted house has. I love horror comedy, so there's a lot
Yeah,
of comedy.
yeah.
Last year we kind of tiptoed a little too much in the comedy, so this year we're gonna make it a little more scary. But I do like funny things, and so those types of movies, like especially movies that are referential, and you know,
Yeah.
those are funny.
Going forward, then, do you have a short term goal in mind, and then maybe a more longer form goal that like it's something that sticks in your mind is like this is something I want to achieve, this is something I have to achieve?
Well, for me, eventually, for some reason, Chucky's lasted with me for so many years now. I think I made my first doll back in 2015, maybe 16. And it keeps escalating to like bigger and bigger. And now you're doing this and that. And I would love to eventually get away from it. I would prefer, excuse me, to create something of my own and not something that was created before I was born and now I'm just making copies of it. I would really prefer to design, something, and yeah, movies would be cool, but I don't know how realistic that is. Um, I would really like to do more with my haunted house. Unfortunately, Chucky pays the bills, but he also takes a lot of time away from this haunt that I have a lot of sweat and tears in. And at some point, I'd like to make that more important than making dolls for people. And I've kind of done that this year. I kind of raised my prices on my custom work because I really would rather get less of that custom work, and get more work, making the haunt and stuff for the haunt. I'd really like to get involved with building props for other haunted attractions. I kind of did that with the raccoons. Some other haunts bought up some of my raccoons, and I made extra stuff like that. And so in some haunts in different states, there's some random raccoons in there, and I would like to just do more of that. I love building pneumatic animatronics, and I'd rather spend time on that. But at this point, Chucky's here, and if they want me for further TV shows or movies, I'll do them. I will always have the molds and the patterns and all that. But eventually, I'd like to get away from building custom ones. I don't mind the toy manufacturing. I get a royalty for that. That's fine. But building these custom ones are the biggest pain in the butt ever. It
So
really is so bad.
so I need to get one of those then before you decide to throw in the towel then.
Well, what I'll probably end up doing is, and I've debated about doing this next year, was to stop taking pre-orders on them. Right now, I have over a 1 year waiting list. If you were to order a custom,
Wow.
I am quick enough. It's so silly. And when I made this deal with Trick or Treat, I was hoping, like, great, I'm going to try to get you guys to make the best doll so that it takes that away from me so that I don't have to make customs anymore. But there's clients out there that still want the nice custom, something handmade by the artist. I'm affiliated with the TV show and the last movie, so people find value in that and they want a doll made by me. So, I'll still make them. What I'd like to do in the future is not do pre-orders, but make one up and then put it on eBay and let people bid on it, and have it already made, because making these individually and then there's a list of people, it just stresses you out. Like right now I have to build 7 of them by the end of this month. It has to be
Christ
done. And
almighty.
tedious. I got one right here's one. Here's what we call, this is the CP1 good guy.
I will say
And
it is beautiful.
the finish on them, it has a certain look, and that's why people want it. They want to order it directly from me. Like, here's one. This is a Child's Play 2 version. And so this one's going to get eyebrows and eyelashes after this video. um, but, they're a pain. You got to cast them up. You got to sand down all the mold lines. I try to keep them really clean as possible. It's hard to make a clean piece, and then let's say you're spraying the clear coat, and all of a sudden a piece of dust lands on it.
Yeah.
This room I try to keep as clean as possible, but it just happens, and then you gotta go back and lightly sand off the dust, and then you might have to do some painting, but you have to recoat it in clear, and it's just It sucks. My old studio was very dusty, so I had that problem all the time, and I'd have to literally bring a hose in and spray down the area with water. It was a cement floor just to keep
The
the
dust
dust.
down. Yeah.
And but then you also have moisture in the air, so it's science of it, but that stuff doesn't work well either. So it's it's a pain to make them, and so I don't know. I'd like to have something else to do by next year, but I'll probably just be making dolls.
How I have two quick questions before I let you go. You mentioned like prop making and stuff like that. Is that something that do you collect props or memorabilia, or is that something that you find yourself, if you see something cool in a movie or from a TV show, do you ever find yourself being like, yeah, I need to make myself one of those?
Well, it was like the Good Guy doll. I think that's what started me into getting custom made stuff because I mean I did Freddy gloves too. I did that actually first when I was probably like 14 to 17 years old. I made Freddy gloves by hand and I'd put them on eBay and um, but I always just liked making them and then seeing other people having the work I had and then the dolls really brought me into how to make molds and how to um, I'm really picky, so I really everything's very fine. The eye hole cuts have to be perfect. The paint has to be right. Different things like the corduroy overalls have to be sewn up just a certain way, and even with the factories in Hong Kong that make the mass-produced versions, it sucks because it's all mass-produced. It's hard to control everything once the factories start going, but you can get some things, you can nitpick things and try to make it perfect. But um, anyway, back to mold making is just Chucky's got me to make better molds. I got molds that are pretty clean. It's kind of like a hobby or perfectionist thing to be like, I can make a mold that looks fine and it's usable, but I want a mold that looks pretty and nice and clean, and it's not going to cut me when I'm handling it. Smooth stuff like that. Over the years, I've gotten really, if I make a new mold, I want it to be this. I want it to function very well, rather than just making a casting, but also how it works. So
And I don't think we really touched on it, but how? Uh, I'm not. I don't think I asked. How did you originally like? Were you always this creative or hands on with things? Like you said, when you purchased your house, you've done a lot of like renovation work yourself. Obviously, making something like a custom handmade Chucky doll is, and even
yeah.
from maybe not even from the artist's point of view, but I feel like now even the customer base there are really zoned in as well. Like they want the exact, they know what they want. They know what way they want it treaded. And how did you like come to be so? Was that just a natural thing?
Well, it's partly competitive. So, in the doll scenario, there's everyone. There a lot of people are. There's a lot of custom makers out there that make good guy dolls, and I'm not going to say whose is better or who's whatever, but I'm probably the most expensive person to go through to get your custom done, but it's going to be done right, and that's where making these for so many years, you're just sort of like, okay, I know this is how the material is going to handle over the years. It's not going to darken. I'm going to make it not only look good but last long. It's going to, as long as it's taken care of, it's going to look good for many years. And I think that's why people go through and it hasn't died yet. Um, and I've been making pretty much the two same faces for the last 5, 6 years, and people still want it, which is surprising. But there's always like every once in a while you get a collector that maybe they just discovered Chucky and they want to get. You're talking before about prop collecting and stuff like that. I have a lot of original props from the Child's Play films. I've regrettably sold a lot over the years, but lately I've been holding on to a lot of things, and I got some cool pieces. But there's also a lot of random pieces. I bought the Saint Bernard from Beethoven. It's sitting in my. I don't know what to do with it, but I thought it was cool. I wanted to examine the inner workings of that puppet, and there's like all this stuff going on the inside because the arms and stuff move, and the
Mm-hmm.
tail wags, and I actually want to get it to work at some point. But it's just a cool like study piece. And a lot of that stuff is to me like when you're looking at how they made something, you're like, wow, like oh they did it that way, and that's how I want to try to make it. There's a lot of props you'd be surprised. I had a hero screen used Child's Play 2 doll, and on film it looks great, but in person you're like, there's all these air bubbles everywhere, but you don't see them on film. But like if I was to make a custom doll, it can't have any air bubbles, because it's
Yeah.
examining it. So you kind of that's the struggle with that is you got to make it more perfect than it was on film. Because in film, the film dolls look great from a distance and maybe on film stock, but like when you're up close in person with it, you're like, wow, there's like all this pitting in these holes, and the makeup isn't exact or whatever. So it's kind of one of those things that it works on TV, but um, you kind of see the mistakes now. So, not to criticize anything with a TV show, but every once in a while you see something with the puppet that if they shot it in film, it would have looked fine. But now that it's in digital, you realize more of the puppet. You know what I mean? The movements of the puppet because
Yeah, yeah.
the film is so clear compared to 5 mil or whatever.
What's the obviously for anybody listening to the audio version of this or watching the video version, all the links will be down below to all of Garrett's projects and places you can support him. But for you personally, where's the best place that people can either I guess keep up to date with what you're doing or support you or
Instagram. It's at Garrett Zima. That is the best way because Facebook. The only reason I'm really on Facebook is for Facebook Marketplace, and there's a group we have called Art of Chucky, and then there's another group that I moderate called Chucky Nation. But that's pretty much it. My Instagram is like everything. I'm posting stuff about the haunted house. Um, that particular one, I try to post more about what I'm doing for my work. Um, and then I have another one for my personal. But yeah, there's a lot of posts of dolls, and
mm-hmm.
if I go on dates, I gotta give them the other Instagram account. So, what? That's the hardest. I was on a date this past weekend, and it went really bad because it was you know, it was just like because you do this Halloween stuff, like it means you're kind of creepy or weird in a way. And I'm like, I'm pretty normal, not completely normal, but
But pretty
enough.
normal.
I'm not gonna do nothing to you. So yeah,
You know what? It's so weird with with horror becoming so mainstream in the last like 10 years that people even still have that outlook.
yeah. Well, I'm from Wisconsin, and that's where Jeffrey Dahmer came from. So when people when I go on dates, it's like people bring that up. Oh, you ain't no Jeffrey Dahmer, are you? And I have taxidermy, so it is kind of bizarre. But
Yeah, and
it's
that
like
thing you showed us earlier.
I have a deer head, so it's like I didn't shoot it or nothing. I got it, and I thought it looked cool. But to other people, it might be like that's too far, that's creepy, and that's fine. It's like good to know so that I can go on a different date with someone that might appreciate it. So I don't know.
That's the unicorn that you have to try and find.
Right.
Um, Final question then: why horror, and what does it mean to you?
Um, you know, it's man. I mean, it all started with the haunted house, but I like films that make you react. and either it's emotion or laughing, like, and that's what I like about films, and that's why I like watching movies and stuff like that. And the horror genre's got a lot of good mix in that. I was watching a movie. Usually, I don't watch subtitle movies because I can't keep up. But I watched Train to Busan,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
at the end of the movie, you kind of tear up at that scene. Not going to spoil it, but it's horror can be a lot of things, and I just like it, and I'd rather watch that over a chick flick. Um, so I don't know. There's different movies for everybody. There's people that love watching the Transformer movies, and I'm not one of them. So
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. Sometimes it's underplayed, which is kind of shocking again because I had a similar conversation with somebody yesterday, and it was just the fact of like majority of like big box office movies in the last couple of years have all been horror movies.
yeah,
Even during the pandemic and stuff, a lot of the movies that went huge on streaming were all horror movies. I mean, even I don't know. I can't really pinpoint many other genres or communities where like somebody like you is getting constantly hounded by people to make handmade custom dolls from a movie that came out in the 80s. It just
yeah,
kind of shows you like the power, I think, of the genre.
yeah. It's wild. I personally wouldn't buy one of my dolls because I'm cheap and I wouldn't pay the price. But there's a lot of people do. But there's stuff that I've purchased that other horror things that I paid a lot of money for, mainly movie props. I more value movie props than replicas. That's what I should say. But people think I'm nuts, but it's like I really like it, and it's the real piece, and it's like having a little museum in your house, to show people when you're entertaining. So.
Same, like and I have some weird ones that like I have like nostalgia for. I have back there, you can't really see it, but in that white frame back there,
Okay.
I have a piece of the screen used towboat from Ghost Ship in 2002.
Uh,
And then on this side over here, I have three pieces of the hull from the actual cruise ship.
oh, cool.
Screen use props, and like when I say it to people, and then they go, "And how much were those then?" And I'm like, "Well, I had to buy them from Australia where the movie was shot, and this and that, and then import tax." And they're like, "Are you psychotic?"
Yeah,
And
you guys get screwed with the import taxes.
yeah,
We don't really. I mean, there's been one time I think I had to pay some sort of fee because of the price of the prop coming in.
yeah,
Uh, but yeah, I did a lot of swatch collecting when I started, so I had like a swatch of the Riddler's costume from Batman Forever, and those were great things to trade and level up. The only thing I've kind of considered recently was like there's a that's boat related, that's movie prop, is the Orca 2. They have like pieces of the Orca
oh
2.
yeah, yeah.
And like, but you're kind of always like curious. It's like, is it though? Like, is it really? Because it's hard to prove those things, but you gotta believe it.
That's like
So,
I done like extensive from what I could research into that ghost ship thing, and I want to say I was satisfied, but then at the same time I'm always like, wait a second, though, I could be getting completely ripped off here.
yeah, you never know. It's one of when you're talking about something that's a fragment or pieces, you don't know, but you gotta hope you didn't pay too much for it. But the Jaws one, there's some collectors out there that if you're buying from that collector, like a lot of people buy when they buy Chucky movie props from me, I can put my name on it and they trust
Yeah,
that
you can vouch
it's
for yeah,
real because I've done a lot of research and I know what's legit. So when someone's buying something from me, they know that if it's coming from me, it's more legit rather than some random eBay listing that, So, but it's cool. It's a cool talking piece. then my new talking piece. Well, the new one, I have everything mailed to my dad's house because I have a house in the city, and I'm always worried people are gonna, if packages are left out, they're gonna be taken. And the new piece I'm getting today is in Scary Movie 2. There, there's the girl. She's having sex with the ghost, and when the ghost finishes, the painting on the wall changes to where he's grinning, and that's the painting I'm getting today. Is
Oh
the
wow.
ghost painting. But I always wanted a painting from a movie to put in my house just to have up. And about a year ago, I should have just paid the price, but there was Fester from the Addams Family. It was a mural that was painted for that movie, and I was like, shoot, I should have bought that. And at the time, I don't think it went for very much. So when I saw this thing come up available, I had to scoop it up. So I have something to hang up on the walls of my living room.
I love that as well because that's such a unique kind of like, it's not one of those, I don't want to say mass produced, but it's a little bit more
Right.
quirky in the sense of like you kind of have to have that conversation and kind of explain maybe a little bit like, okay, you know what Scary Movie 2 is, you might know this exact reference.
Yeah, like so, like my ex, he doesn't. We're still friends or anything, but he doesn't really like horror movies or anything like that. But he loves Scary Movie 2. So when I was telling him about this, he kind of chuckled because he knew exactly what that scene was. And so, some people that come through, it's almost like the painting doesn't need explanation, but some people it does. There's some pieces I have where people, like, what is that? And then you explain it, they're like, oh, that's pretty cool. And I'll probably put a little plaque by the painting saying what it is too, in case I like pass away or something, and then like my family's like, well, this is a stupid
Just throw it
painting.
away. Someday you're gonna have to. I know you said you do it with the haunt now, but someday you might have to open like a little, I don't know, some form of like museum or something where people can come in and see all this shit.
Um, I kind of so my friend James does a thing called he runs the HSPPA, and when you go to these conventions, I mainly just go to the Flashback Weekend convention with him. That's in Chicago, and he has so many props. And so in Chicago, this one coming up in August, I'm gonna have some of my Chucky stuff there. But he has a little traveling museum, and the only thing I would go as far as doing is with the haunt, and maybe making in the queue line, making that more bigger.
Yeah,
Having
yeah.
more props. Like this year, if I have time, I want to build some. You have to make very secure display cases when you're talking about random people, possibly intoxicated, waiting in line. You having the stuff that costs thousands of dollars sitting in display cases. You want to have it, secure. So my hope is I'll have time this year to put these display cases in and actually have something cool for people to view. Because usually I just do one or two display cases, but I'm hoping to do a much larger display.
Final question. I know we've went like way over the last time I said I was just about to let you go. That was something I was going to ask earlier when we talked about the haunt. Um, is that something that you struggle with? Like I feel like when you were talking about all this time, aside from the money, even all this time, effort, and passion that you put into sets and building props and stuff, and then even like you said, bringing some of your own memorabilia to put in
Yeah.
the queue line. Is that ever something like I feel like, man, I would be living on my nerves, being like, I hope some drunken dickhead doesn't start fucking with my stuff.
Yeah. Well, the cases I've had, I mean, the person, whoever, if someone was to break something, I mean, you'd have to do a lot to get into those display cases. I mean, you could break it, and I mean, I don't. It's one of those things you just don't know. I haven't had any crazy thing happen in a while. About 3 years ago, there was a kid. I had this little. This it was a plastic spider base, and then the legs were wire, and it was in the queue line. And one of the customers took it, and the ticket person at the door was like, "Hey, is that ours?" And he's like, "No, it's mine." And so the worker didn't know better enough, but let the kid through. and he went around with that spider and started pelting the actors with it, like beating them up. And I had to, I'm here on a walkie having to run around and try to find this kid. And I guess at one point, even he picked up wood chips and threw it at this girl's face and all this stuff. And you're like freaking out. And the kid ran and got into the car and they drove off and didn't catch him in time. But this year, that I'm hoping will be a little bit more secure than that. But stuff like that can happen. You get some wackos that come through, and you gotta be prepared to take them. And now with every year it gets bigger and bigger. I'm sure this year we'll have a lot of customers. I gotta implement better security measures so that would never happen again. You just learn.
If there's any message anybody can take from this, it's don't be an a-hole like that.
Yes. I don't. I've gone to a haunt buzzed before and had a good time. But being like completely intoxicated isn't a good way to go. Because a lot of times I notice, like, when people are drunk like that, they're just abusing things and trying to, I don't know, they're just causing trouble. And I've had people that weren't drunk that caused trouble.
Yeah, yeah. Which sometimes is nearly worse.
But it's just that's part of the business. I mean, you go to any supermarket, they have security and they gotta deal with some crazy people sometimes, and you gotta, it doesn't just happen at haunts, but when you have actors and a lot of the actors are kids, I get really worried because I don't want them to get hurt by anybody, and I want to make sure everyone's safe.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like I could probably go on and I keep quizzing you and talking to you about this stuff, but only one of us doesn't have very much to do right now. So, and it's not you. I appreciate you taking the time, man. It's been a pleasure. I hope that we can do this again, maybe down the line when you can talk a little bit more about some other stuff you've got going on.
In after the season and tell you how it all went, because this year this will probably be the most time I've put into the haunt, and I have all these goals that are almost seem undoable, but I'll share all the war stories.
Yeah, we have to revisit towards the end of the year maybe, and find out about all that.
Sure.
It's been a pleasure, man. Like I said, wish you all the best. Congratulations on all the success so far. And yeah, I'll chat soon.
Yeah, you have a good one, man.
You too, man.